Here are 10 shocking California landlord laws that could wreck your investment in 2026. Did you know over 40% of California landlords are expected to lose money on their rentals by the end of 2026? Shocking, right? But here is what is worse. It is not because of bad tenants or a housing crash. It is the law. A wave of new landlord legislation has just passed, and it is changing the game in ways most property owners are not ready for. These are not just minor rule tweaks. We are talking about laws that restrict how much rent you can charge, limit your power to evict, and even force you to accept tenants you are not comfortable with. All while you are footing higher bills for maintenance, insurance, and taxes. And the scariest part is that most landlords will not find out until it is too late. When their profits disappear or they are stuck in a legal mess they never saw coming. In this discussion, we will reveal the 10 most shocking California landlord laws that could completely wreck your investment in 2026. If you are thinking about buying property or already own some, you cannot afford to miss this. Stay with us until the end. Law 1, Statewide Rent Control Expansion under AB 1482. Let's start with the law that is quietly killing cash flow for landlords across California. The expansion of AB 1482, also known as the Tenant Protection Act. This law, originally passed in 2019, placed limits on how much landlords could raise rent each year. But now, in 2026, the rules have tightened even more, and the impact is devastating. Under the new changes, landlords can only raise rent by a maximum of 5% plus local inflation, capped at 7% total. Even in high-cost areas where property taxes, insurance, and maintenance are skyrocketing. Before you had some wiggle room, now even if your costs jumped by 10 to 15% in a year, you are legally blocked from adjusting rent to match. That means every year you are falling further behind. Imagine this. You own a triplex in Los Angeles. Property taxes just went up. Insurance premiums are through the roof. And your plumber is charging double what he did 2 years ago. But when you try to raise rent to cover those costs, the law stops you. You are losing money legally. And if you think you can outsmart the system with creative rent hikes or hidden fees, think again. Penalties for violating rent control laws now include hefty fines and tenant lawsuits, even if it was an honest mistake. What you can do is reevaluate your rental pricing strategy now. Focus on long-term tenants. Upgrade units strategically to qualify for capital improvement exceptions and consider markets outside rent-controlled zones if you are planning to invest again. This is not just about rent. It is about your entire investment strategy, and we are only getting started. Law 2, Stricter Just Cause Eviction Rules. If you think eviction is your safety net as a landlord, California just cut a giant hole in it. The new expansion of just cause eviction laws has made removing a tenant slower, harder, and far more expensive, even when you are clearly in the right. Here is the problem. In 2026, landlords must now meet stricter documentation standards, longer notice periods, and more specific legal language just to start an eviction. Missing a single form, date, or wording requirement can reset the entire process, forcing you to start from scratch. Meanwhile, the tenant stays, often rent-free. Non-payment of rent used to be straightforward. Not anymore. Tenants can now claim temporary financial hardship, demand payment plans, or challenge notices on technicalities. Even owner move-in evictions face heavier scrutiny, requiring proof, affidavits, and in some cities, relocation payments worth thousands of dollars. Picture this. Your tenant stops paying rent. 3 months pass. You file for eviction only to have it delayed again because a notice was not served exactly right. Another 2 months go by. That is 5 months of lost income, plus legal fees, mortgage payments, taxes, and insurance, all on you. And here is the real kicker. Retaliation claims. If a tenant argues that your eviction was linked to a repair request or complaint, even weeks earlier, the burden shifts to you to prove it was not. One accusation can freeze the entire case. What you can do is document everything. Every payment, every message, every repair. Use professional property management software. Consult eviction attorneys before problems escalate and screen tenants like your investment depends on it, because it does. Eviction is no longer a backup plan. It is a legal minefield, and the risks only grow from here. Law 3, Mandatory Acceptance of Section 8 and Housing Vouchers. If you thought you had the right to choose your tenants based on income source, not anymore. As of 2026, California landlords are now legally required to accept Section 8 and other housing vouchers as a valid form of income. And rejecting an applicant solely because they use a voucher is considered discrimination. Sounds fair in theory, right? But here is the twist. The practical burden falls on you, the landlord. Accepting Section 8 is not like a regular lease. It involves government inspections, delayed payments, and often added paperwork that can push your timeline back by weeks, even months. Let's say your unit is vacant and a voucher holder applies. You accept, but now you are waiting on a county inspection. If they find even one small violation, a cracked tile, a loose handrail, a missing smoke detector, they will demand repairs before approving move-in. Meanwhile, you are losing rent day by day. And when rent payments do come in, they are split. Part from the government, part from the tenant. If the tenant misses their portion, you are still short. And evicting them is not easy under the new just cause laws we just covered. What you can do is get familiar with the Section 8 process in your county. Build a checklist to pre-inspect your units and most importantly, screen voucher holders just like any other applicant. Check rental history, background, and references. You cannot deny based on income source, but you can deny based on legitimate rental criteria. This law changes how you manage risk, and delays can eat into your profits fast. We are only 3 laws in and it is already getting messy. Law 4, Ban on blanket no pet policies. Think you can just say no pets allowed and move on? Not anymore. In 2026, California has taken another step in favor of tenant rights by essentially banning blanket no pet policies, especially when it comes to emotional support animals and even certain household pets. Under the updated housing regulations, landlords must now consider reasonable accommodations for tenants who claim to have an ESA, even if your lease says no pets. And here is the catch. You cannot ask for detailed medical proof. A simple letter from a licensed provider is enough in most cases. Deny it and you could be hit with a discrimination lawsuit, federal fair housing violations, or state-level fines. But it does not stop there. Even with standard pets, many local jurisdictions now require justification for denial. That means you cannot reject an applicant just because they have a cat or a small dog unless you can prove it would cause harm or damage that cannot be reasonably prevented. Imagine trying to rent out your newly renovated unit. You have got brand new flooring, fresh paint, and thousands invested in upgrades. Then a tenant applies with a large dog, and by law, you might not be able to say no. If that dog scratches up your floors or leaves behind odors, you are on the hook. What you can do is update your lease to include a detailed pet policy, pet deposits, cleaning fees, behavioral requirements, and consequences for damage. Make sure everything is legally compliant, and always consult fair housing guidelines before denying an applicant with an ESA. This law is not just about pets. It is about losing control over who lives in your property. And we are only halfway through. Law 5, Limitations on security deposits. Here is a change that sounds minor until it costs you thousands. California has officially capped security deposits at just 1 month's rent, regardless of the tenant's income, credit history, or risk level. Yes, even for furnished units or high-end properties. In the past, landlords could ask for up to 2 months' rent or more for furnished places to protect against damages, unpaid rent, or early move-outs. Now, with this new law in place, your hands are tied. You get 1 month's rent and that is it. Whether your unit is a $2,500 studio or a $4,000 luxury condo, the risk is the same. And you are the one absorbing it. Here is the problem. Not all tenants are equal. Some have poor credit, past evictions, or no rental history. Normally, you would offset that risk with a higher deposit. But now, you legally cannot. If they trash the unit or skip out on rent, you are left chasing money through collections or small claims court, both time-consuming and rarely successful. Picture this. A tenant with shaky credit applies. You are unsure, but the rent is high and your unit has been sitting vacant. You cannot ask for more deposit, and turning them down risks discrimination claims. So you take the chance and it backfires. The cost of repairs alone exceeds the full deposit. What you can do is get serious about tenant screening, credit checks, income verification, and references. Do not skip anything. Also build in clear damage clauses and charge for additional services like non-refundable cleaning fees where legally allowed. This law shifts the financial risk away from the tenant and squarely onto your shoulders. And we have still got more surprises coming your way. Law 6, New Habitability Standards and Surprise Inspections. Think your rental unit is up to code? Think again. In 2026, California has introduced stricter habitability standards and granted more power to local governments to conduct surprise inspections. And if your property does not meet every requirement, you could be fined or even barred from collecting rent until it is fixed. The new rules expand what qualifies as habitability. It is not just about working plumbing or electricity anymore. Now it includes proper ventilation, mold prevention, energy efficiency, and even things like noise insulation in certain counties. If you miss just one of these, your tenant could file a complaint and the city may show up unannounced. Here is where it gets scary. Tenants can now request an inspection anonymously. That means if someone is upset about a rent increase or denied request, they could call the city and suddenly you are dealing with inspectors, citations, and a legal clock to fix everything or face penalties. Imagine being mid-lease, thinking everything is fine, and then getting hit with a notice that says your unit fails inspection due to outdated windows or minor leaks. Now you are spending thousands on emergency repairs and possibly refunding rent, all while trying to keep other tenants happy. What you can do is be proactive. Schedule quarterly self-inspections. Hire professionals to check major systems like HVAC and plumbing. And stay ahead of local codes, which often change year to year. Create a checklist based on your city's latest standards. These new rules are not just red tape. They are potential money pits, and they give tenants more leverage than ever before. Stay ready or be ready to pay. Law 7, Tenant Right to Organize. In 2026, California has taken a bold step by strengthening the legal right of tenants to organize. And for landlords, this could mean a major shift in how you manage your property. What was once a quiet landlord-tenant relationship can now quickly turn into collective action, formal demands, and legal challenges, all within the walls of your own building. Here is what the law says. Tenants now have the explicit right to form associations, hold meetings on the property, even in common areas, and post organizing materials, without your interference. That means they can gather, protest rent increases, demand repairs, and challenge your policies. And you are legally prohibited from retaliating or restricting these activities. Sounds democratic, sure. But it can also turn your rental property into a public relations and legal battleground. One organized tenant group can delay renovations, fight rent adjustments, and draw unwanted attention from housing authorities or media outlets. And once a group forms, you may be forced into formal negotiations over changes that used to be entirely under your control. Picture this. You issue a legal rent increase. Days later, half your tenants join a local tenant union. They start challenging every clause in your lease, organizing meetings in the courtyard, and demanding concessions while documenting everything for potential legal action. What you can do is build trust before problems arise. Be transparent with rent increases. Document every repair and respond quickly to concerns. Consider offering community meetings or surveys so tenants feel heard. Good communication can prevent bad headlines. This law gives your tenants a louder voice, and you will hear it whether you are ready or not. And yes, it gets even tougher from here. Law 8, Cooling off periods for rent increases. Think you can raise rent quickly to match rising expenses? Not so fast. In 2026, California introduced mandatory cooling-off periods that delay certain rent increases, even if they are legal under rent control limits. This law is a silent profit killer, especially for landlords trying to stay afloat in high-inflation markets. Here is how it works. If you issue a rent increase above a certain threshold, even within legal caps, you must now provide extended written notice, up to 90 days in some jurisdictions. And during that time, tenants can contest the increase, request mediation, or file hardship claims to delay or challenge it. The result is that you lose valuable time reacting to inflation, rising maintenance costs, or property tax hikes, while your bills go up instantly. Your rent increase takes months to kick in, if it is not blocked or renegotiated. Picture this. You need to raise rent by 6% to cover new insurance costs. You issue a notice expecting it to go into effect next month. But now you are legally forced to wait 3 months, and your tenant starts a dispute, stretching it out even longer. That is months of lost revenue, and there is nothing you can do. What you can do is plan your rent adjustments early and in smaller incremental steps if possible. Avoid big jumps that could trigger the cooling-off period. Also send increases with detailed explanations, maintenance costs, tax hikes, and so on, to reduce pushback. This law slows down your ability to adapt while your expenses speed up. And if you are not strategic, you will always be playing financial catch-up. We are almost at the end, but there are still 2 more laws every landlord needs to hear. Law 9, Eviction Moratorium Extensions in Local Counties. You might think the eviction moratoriums from the pandemic era are long gone, but think again. While the statewide protections have expired, several California counties and cities have quietly extended their own versions. And if you are not paying attention, you could be breaking the law without even knowing it. Cities like Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Francisco have kept local eviction bans or restrictions in place through 2026, especially for low-income tenants, tenants claiming COVID-related hardship, or those involved in disputes over rent increases or maintenance. These local rules often override state law. And yes, they apply even if you have never heard of them. Imagine trying to evict a tenant for non-payment after 4 months of missed rent, only to learn your city requires a 12-month repayment plan before eviction can even be considered. Or worse, you file the paperwork and end up in court, only to have the case thrown out because of a local ordinance you did not follow. These moratoriums often include penalties for violations, ranging from thousands in fines to mandatory rent repayment to the tenant, and in some cities, even tenant attorney fees. What you can do is check the local housing laws in your city or county, not just statewide guidelines. Bookmark your city's rent board or housing department page and sign up for updates. When in doubt, consult a local landlord attorney before starting any eviction process. This patchwork of local laws can turn one wrong move into a legal disaster. Do not assume you are in the clear. Double-check before you act. Only one law left, and it might just surprise you the most. Law 10, Data Privacy and Tenant Information Laws. In 2026, California has added another layer of complexity for landlords, and this time it is all about data privacy. Under new regulations aligned with the California Consumer Privacy Act and recent housing-specific amendments, landlords are now legally required to disclose how they collect, store, and use tenant data, or face serious penalties. Think this only applies to big companies? Nope. If you collect any tenant information, including names, addresses, employment details, social security numbers, or even emergency contacts, you are now considered a data holder and must follow strict guidelines for handling that information. This means you need to provide tenants with a clear privacy policy, outline how their data is stored, especially if you use property management software, and give them the ability to request, review, or delete their data in certain cases. Failing to do so can result in fines of up to $2,500 per violation or $7,500 per intentional violation. Now picture this. You use a basic rental application template, store information on your laptop, and forget about it. Months later, a former applicant demands a copy of their data and how it was used. You cannot provide it, and suddenly you are facing a formal complaint and a possible investigation. What you can do is switch to secure, compliant tenant screening platforms. Create a simple, clear privacy disclosure to include with every application and never store sensitive data unprotected on personal devices. This law is less about rent and more about reputation. But the risks are just as real. In today's world, landlords are not just housing providers. You are data handlers too. And that wraps up the 10 laws. But your work as a landlord, it is only getting started. Conclusion: adapt or pay the price. Being a landlord in California has never been easy, but 2026 has changed the game entirely. These 10 new laws are not just red tape. They are legal traps, financial pitfalls, and rights redefined. Whether it is rent control, eviction delays, surprise inspections, or tenant organizing movements, one thing is clear. Landlords are losing control, and those who do not adapt will pay the price. But here is the good news. Now you know what is coming. Most property owners will not learn about these changes until they are slapped with a fine, dragged into court, or watching their profits vanish month by month. You are already ahead, and that gives you the power to protect your investment, make smarter decisions, and stay compliant without sacrificing cash flow. So what is next? Do not wait until a tenant files a complaint or the city inspector is at your door. Audit your leases, recheck your screening process, update your property systems, and most importantly, stay informed because California is not slowing down with new regulations, and what is legal today could be restricted tomorrow.